Commander Jake Sullivan sat in his chair on the bridge of the research station Meridian. The big gas giant Kepler 442b spun slowly below them with its pretty blue and green clouds. Jake had been running this station for 3 years now, and nothing exciting ever happened here. They studied the gas giant and looked for useful minerals in the nearby asteroids. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The communication system made a loud beeping sound. Jake looked at the screen and saw something strange. The signal was coming from deep space, but it was not from any human ship or station. The computer said it was an unknown transmission using old Earth radio frequencies. "Lisa, get over here," Jake called to Dr. Lisa Parker, who was working at her science station. She was the best alien life expert they had, even though they had never found any aliens before. Lisa walked over quickly and looked at the strange signal on the screen. "This is weird, Jake," she said while typing on her computer. "The signal is definitely artificial, but the pattern is not human. Someone or something is trying to talk to us." Jake pressed the button to play the message. Static filled the bridge for a few seconds. Then a voice came through. It sounded strange and broken, like someone was using a very bad translation program. "Help us, please," the voice said with long pauses between words. "We are dying. Our people are being killed. The Zenthari take our worlds. We know about humans from your radio signals. Please help us. We give you good things in return." Lisa and Jake looked at each other with wide eyes. This was first contact with an alien species, and it was a cry for help. The voice continued speaking, but most of it was hard to understand. Lisa worked fast to clean up the signal and make it clearer. "My name is Veltar," the voice said more clearly now. "I speak for the Kithara people. We are part of the coalition of 7 species. For many years we lived in peace, but now the Zenthari Empire attacks us. They are strong warriors who have conquered many worlds. We have good technology, but we do not know how to fight wars. Our ships are destroyed and our people become slaves." Jake felt his heart beating faster. An alien war was happening somewhere in space, and these aliens wanted human help. He had to contact Earth Command right away, but first he needed to learn more. "Lisa, can you send a reply?" he asked. "I think so," she said while working on her equipment. "I can use the same frequency they used. This is Commander Jake Sullivan of the Human Research Station Meridian." Jake spoke into the microphone. "We received your message, Veltar. Can you tell us more about your situation and where you are located?" They waited for several minutes before getting an answer. "Commander Sullivan, thank you for responding," Veltar said, and his voice sounded very relieved. "We are located in the star system you call Kepler 186. It is 47 light-years from your world. The Zenthari have taken 4 of our worlds already. They use big warships and they fight without mercy. We have energy shields and plasma weapons, but they always defeat us in battle." Lisa was recording everything and taking notes. "Ask him about their technology," she whispered to Jake. "What kind of technology can your people offer in exchange for help?" Jake asked. "We Kithra make the best medical technology in the galaxy," Veltar replied. "We can heal injuries that would kill other species. We also know how to change dead planets into worlds where life can grow. The Nereid people in our coalition control water planets and have the best underwater cities. The Solani are made of crystal and create the strongest materials. If you help us fight the Zenthari, we will share all of this with humanity. We will also tell you where to find empty worlds perfect for human colonies." Jake knew this was too big for him to decide alone. He needed to contact Admiral Kate Morrison at Earth Command immediately. "Veltar, we want to help you, but this decision must be made by our leaders on Earth. Can you wait while we discuss this with them?" "Yes, Commander Sullivan," Veltar said. "But please hurry. The Zenthari are preparing another attack and we do not have much time left." Jake ended the transmission and immediately sent an emergency message to Earth. It would take the faster-than-light communication system 6 hours to reach Earth and 6 more hours to get a reply. While they waited, Lisa worked to learn more about the alien signal and tried to figure out if it was real or some kind of trick. "The signal came from the right direction," she told Jake. "The physics all check out. This is definitely coming from the Kepler 186 system. I also analyzed the voice patterns, and they match what we would expect from a non-human throat structure. Jake paced around the bridge, thinking about what this could mean for humanity. If these aliens were telling the truth, then humans could get amazing new technology and find new worlds to colonize. But getting involved in an alien war could also be very dangerous. What if this Xanthari Empire decided to attack Earth after defeating the Coalition? 12 hours later, the reply came from Earth. Admiral Morrison appeared on the main screen looking very serious. She had gray hair and sharp eyes that made her look like someone who had seen many battles. Commander Sullivan, this is an extraordinary situation, she said. President Carter and the Security Council have been discussing your report for hours. We have decided to send a small reconnaissance force to investigate these claims. You will command this mission until our ships arrive. Jake felt nervous but also excited. What are my orders, Admiral? Maintain contact with this Veltar and gather as much information as possible about both the Coalition and the Xanthari Empire, Morrison replied. We need to know their technology levels, their military capabilities, and their true intentions. Captain Ryan Hayes will arrive in 1 week with 3 ships. Until then, you are our only link to these aliens. The next few days were busy as Jake and Lisa talked with Veltar many times. They learned that the Coalition was made up of 7 different alien species who had lived together peacefully for hundreds of years. The Cathara were plant-like beings who could live for very long times. The Nereid looked like dolphins, but could walk on land. The Silani were living crystals who thought very differently from other species. The Xanthari Empire was different. They were a military society that had conquered dozens of worlds over the past 1,000 years. They believed that strong species should rule over weak ones. Their technology was not always better than the Coalition, but they were much better at fighting wars. We have never needed to learn about war, Veltar explained during one conversation. Our species evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation was more important than competition. When the Xanthari attack, our ships line up in neat formations and fight honorably. But the Xanthari use tricks and surprise attacks. They do not follow the rules of civilized combat. Jake realized that these aliens needed more than just extra ships and weapons. They needed to learn how to think about war the way humans did. On Earth, humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had learned every trick and strategy possible. Maybe that knowledge could help the Coalition survive. When Captain Hayes arrived with his 3 ships, Jake was ready with a complete report. The destroyer, Freedom, the stealth frigate Ghost, and the support vessel Ranger took position near the station. Hayes was a tall man with dark hair who had fought in several human conflicts. He listened carefully as Jake explained everything they had learned. So these aliens have good technology, but they fight like gentlemen, Hayes said with a slight smile. The Xanthari sound like they fight to win no matter what it takes. This could be interesting. Hayes made the decision to take his small fleet to the Kepler 186 system to see the situation for himself. If the Coalition was really as desperate as they claimed, then maybe humanity could help them. And if the technology they offered was as good as they said, then it would be worth the risk. As the 4 human ships prepared to make the jump to alien space, Jake felt like he was watching history being made. Humanity was about to enter a galactic war, and nothing would ever be the same again. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of the destroyer Freedom as his small fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Helios Prime. The planet was supposed to be the Coalition forward base, but what Hayes saw shocked him. Debris from destroyed ships floated everywhere in space around the planet. Some of the wreckage was clearly alien in design, with smooth curves and crystal-like materials that caught the starlight. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the planet," said Lieutenant Sam Brooks, his tactical officer. Brooks was a young woman with red hair who had graduated top of her class from the Space Navy Academy. "Put it through," Hayes replied while studying the destruction around them. The alien voice of Veltar came through the speakers. "Human ships welcome to Helios Prime. I am sorry you must see us in such a desperate state. The Xanthari attacked us yesterday and destroyed half of our defensive fleet." Hayes felt anger building in his chest as he looked at the floating remains of alien ships. "Veltar, this is Captain Hayes. We are here to assess the situation and see how we can help. Can you guide us to a safe landing area?" "Yes, Captain. Follow the coordinates I am sending to your ship. Be careful of the debris field. Some of those pieces are still radioactive from Xanthari plasma weapons." The Freedom carefully moved through the wreckage, followed by the Ghost and the Ranger. Hayes could see that some of the destroyed Coalition ships had been much larger than his own vessels. They had thick armor and what looked like powerful energy weapons, but they had still been defeated. On the planet's surface, Hayes met with the Coalition War Council in a large crystal building that served as their headquarters. The alien leaders were more diverse than he had expected. Admiral HFY of the Nereid species looked like a giant dolphin that could walk upright on two legs. Her skin was dark blue, and she moved with grace even on land. General Colvin of the Hyvani was more disturbing to look at. He resembled a huge ant with 6 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like jewels. Veltar was there too, and Hayes finally got to see what a Kithara looked like. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like tree bark. His movements were slow and careful, like an ancient wise man. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that was pleasant to hear. "Captain Hayes, thank you for coming to help us," Veltar said. "We have studied your species through your radio and television signals. Humans seem to understand conflict in ways that we do not." "Tell me about how you fight battles," Hayes asked while his team set up recording equipment. Admiral HFY answered. "First, we position our ships in proper formations based on their size and weapon strength. The largest ships go in front to protect the smaller ones. We announce our intentions to the enemy and give them a chance to surrender before fighting begins. When battle starts, we aim for enemy weapons and engines to disable them without unnecessary killing." Hayes tried not to show his surprise. These aliens were fighting wars, like they were playing a board game with rules that both sides agreed to follow. No wonder they were losing to the Zenthari. "What do the Zenthari do differently?" he asked. General Colvin clicked his mandibles together in what seemed like frustration. "They attack without warning from multiple directions. They target our command ships first to disrupt our coordination. They use asteroids and space debris to hide their approach. They broadcast false surrender signals to trick our ships into lowering their shields. Most shameful of all, they target medical ships and civilian transports." Lieutenant Brooks was taking detailed notes on everything the aliens said. Hayes could see she was thinking the same thing he was. The Zenthari were fighting to win while the Coalition was fighting to be honorable. In a real war, honor usually got you killed. "I would like to observe one of your battles," Hayes said. "Can you arrange that?" "Unfortunately, yes," Veltar replied sadly. "We expect another Zenthari attack within 2 days. They have been hitting our supply convoys regularly to weaken our defenses." Hayes spent the next day studying Coalition ships and technology. What he found was impressive, but also frustrating. The aliens had energy shields that could stop any human weapon. Their plasma cannons were more powerful than anything Earth had built. Their ships could travel faster than light without using the big jump gates that human ships needed. But their tactical systems were terrible. The ships had no stealth capabilities. Their sensors could not detect hidden enemies. They had no electronic warfare equipment to jam enemy communications. Most importantly, their crews had never learned to think like warriors. Dr. Emma Stone, the fleet psychologist, spent time talking with different alien species to understand how they thought. She discovered that most Coalition races had evolved on worlds where cooperation was necessary for survival. They had never developed the competitive and sometimes ruthless thinking that humans learned through thousands of years of warfare. "Captain, these beings are not naturally aggressive," she reported to Hayes. "Their minds work differently than ours. They see battle as a last resort that should be conducted with honor and minimal loss of life. The concept of deception in warfare is almost impossible for them to understand." When the Zenthari attack came, Hayes was ready. He had positioned the stealth frigate Ghost in an asteroid field near the expected convoy route. The other 2 human ships stayed hidden on the far side of Helios Prime, where enemy sensors could not detect them. The Coalition convoy consisted of 12 transport ships carrying medical supplies and food. They were protected by 8 warships, arranged in a neat defensive formation. Hayes watched from the Ghost as Zenthari ships appeared from behind a small moon. There were 6 enemy vessels, but they moved in an irregular pattern that made them hard to target. The Coalition ships immediately formed up into their standard defensive pattern and broadcast a formal challenge to the Zenthari forces. The aliens asked the enemy to identify themselves and state their intentions before any fighting began. The Zenthari response was to launch a surprise attack on the Coalition command ship. Their plasma weapons tore through shields and armor while the Coalition was still trying to establish communication. Within minutes, the defensive formation was broken, and individual ships were being hunted down one by one. Hayes had seen enough. "All stations, this is the captain. We are going to show these Zenthari how humans fight. Brooks, prepare the electronic warfare package. Chen, ready the missile tubes. Stone, monitor Coalition communications and be ready to coordinate with their ships." The Ghost moved out of the asteroid field using its stealth systems to remain invisible to Zenthari sensors. Hayes brought his ship up behind the enemy formation while they were focused on destroying Coalition vessels. "Fire missiles," Hayes ordered. 6 human missiles streaked toward the Zenthari ships. The enemy had never seen human weapons before, and their shields were not configured to stop solid projectiles. 3 Zenthari vessels exploded immediately, while the others frantically tried to figure out where the attack had come from. "Now activate the jamming system," Hayes said. Lieutenant Brooks pressed several buttons, and suddenly the Zenthari ships lost communication with each other. Their coordination fell apart as individual captains tried to respond to threats they could not see or understand. Hayes brought the Ghost around for another attack run. This time, he targeted the largest Zenthari ship with everything he had. Missiles and plasma beams hit the enemy vessel from multiple angles. The Zenthari ship tried to return fire but could not lock onto the Ghost because of its stealth technology. Within 10 minutes, all 6 Zenthari ships were destroyed or disabled. The Coalition convoy was saved, and the remaining Coalition warships were broadcasting excited messages of gratitude and amazement. Admiral Zephi contacted the Ghost directly. "Captain Hayes, how did you do that? Your ship is much smaller than the Zenthari vessels, but you defeated them easily." "We used stealth surprise and electronic warfare," Hayes explained. "We attacked from an unexpected direction and disrupted their ability to coordinate their defense. These are basic human military tactics." "Could you teach these tactics to our people?" Veltar asked hopefully. Hayes looked around his bridge at his crew. They had just won a victory against overwhelming odds, using nothing but human cleverness and unconventional thinking. Maybe these aliens could learn to fight the human way after all. "Yes, we can teach you," Hayes said. "But you will have to learn to think differently about warfare. Fighting to win is not the same as fighting to be honorable." Word of the victory spread quickly through Coalition space. For the first time in months, they had defeated a Zenthari force without losing any ships. The human ships had proven that superior technology was not enough if it was not used properly, but Hayes knew this was just the beginning. The Zenthari would investigate what had happened, and they would adapt their tactics. The next battle would be much harder, and humanity would need to be ready for a real war. Commodore Diana Walsh arrived at Helios Prime 3 weeks after Hayes' first victory with the largest human fleet ever assembled outside Earth space. Her battle group included the heavy cruiser Defiance 4 destroyers and, most importantly, the prototype stealth carrier Phantom. The new ship carried 30 advanced fighter craft that had never been tested in real combat. Walsh was a veteran commander with silver hair and sharp blue eyes who had fought pirates in the outer colonies for 15 years. She listened carefully as Captain Hayes briefed her on everything they had learned about Coalition and Zenthari tactics. "So these aliens fight like they are dancing rather than trying to kill each other," Walsh said while studying tactical displays. "And the Zenthari fight like bullies who pick on weaker opponents. Both sides could learn something from human military history." Hayes nodded and pointed to star charts showing recent battle sites. "The Coalition has good technology but no understanding of strategy. They think every battle should be fair and honorable. The Zenthari use overwhelming force and dirty tricks, but they are predictable once you understand their methods." "What do you recommend?" Walsh asked. "We need to train Coalition forces to fight the human way," Hayes replied. "Teach them stealth tactics, electronic warfare, and most importantly, how to think like their enemies instead of like themselves." Walsh approved the plan and immediately began setting up training programs for Coalition personnel. Colonel Steve Murphy arrived on a transport ship with 50 human military advisors who would be embedded with alien units. Murphy was a tough Marine with 20 years of combat experience who specialized in training foreign forces. The training program faced immediate problems. The different alien species had very different ways of thinking about warfare and conflict. The crystal beings called Silani refused to use any tactics that involved deception or lies. They considered such methods to be dishonorable and would rather die than compromise their principles. The gas giant dwellers known as Vortani had trouble understanding three-dimensional movement in space. On their home world, they moved through thick atmospheric layers where up and down had clear meaning. In space, where movement could happen in any direction, their pilots became confused and disoriented. Dr. Stone worked with each species to find ways to adapt human tactics to alien psychology. She discovered that the Silani would accept surprise attacks if they were framed as defensive maneuvers to protect innocent lives. The Vortani could learn space combat if the movements were taught using musical patterns that matched their natural communication methods. While the training continued, the Zenthari were preparing their response to the new threat. War Prime Thaklon arrived in the system with a massive battle fleet of 40 ships, including several dreadnoughts that were larger than anything humans had ever built. Thaklon was an experienced Zenthari commander who had conquered 12 different star systems over his long career. The Zenthari had also learned from their recent defeats. Intelligence reports showed they were adapting their tactics to deal with stealth attacks and electronic warfare. They began using multiple sensor frequencies and backup communication systems that were harder to jam. Their ships started moving in unpredictable patterns to avoid ambush attacks. "The enemy is learning," Hayes reported to Commodore Walsh during a strategy meeting. "We cannot rely on surprise and superior tactics forever. Eventually, we will have to fight them ship to ship, and their technology is still better than ours in many areas." Walsh studied the intelligence reports and tactical analysis. "Then we need to make sure our coalition allies are ready to fight as a unified force. How is the training program progressing?" Colonel Murphy answered from his position at the conference table. "The aliens are learning, but slowly. Their natural instincts work against everything we are trying to teach them. The Cathera keep trying to negotiate with enemy forces even during battle. The Nereid want to rescue damaged enemy ships instead of finishing them off. Only the Hyvani seem to understand that warfare requires ruthless efficiency." "What about their technology?" Walsh asked. "Can we integrate human and alien systems?" Lieutenant Brooks had been working on that problem for weeks. "The Coalition energy shields are compatible with our ships, but their weapons require different power systems. We have successfully installed Cathera medical technology on our vessels and Silani crystal armor on critical areas. The combination makes our ships much more survivable." The first test of the new integrated tactics came when Zenthari forces attacked a Coalition mining station in the outer system. The enemy used their standard overwhelming assault pattern with heavy ships in front and fighters providing support from multiple angles. But this time, the Coalition response was different. Instead of forming neat defensive lines, the alien ships scattered into small groups and began hit-and-run attacks from unexpected directions. Human-trained Cathara pilots used their new stealth equipment to approach unseen, while Nereid ships attacked from below where Zenthari sensors had blind spots. The carrier Phantom proved its worth when Captain Rachel Ford launched her fighter squadrons against the Zenthari fleet. The small human craft moved in chaotic patterns that confused enemy targeting systems. They struck at command ships and supply vessels rather than trying to fight the heavily armed warships directly. "Ford here," the fighter commander reported, over the communication system. "Enemy formation is breaking up. Their command ship is disabled and they have lost coordination between their squadrons." The battle was won in less than an hour with minimal Coalition losses. For the first time, the aliens had fought like humans using deception speed and flexibility instead of honor and tradition. The victory sent shockwaves through both Coalition and Zenthari forces. War Prime Thaklon was disturbed by reports of the new tactics being used against his forces. He had expected the Coalition to get some human weapons and technology, but he had not expected them to change their entire approach to warfare. The Zenthari military had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years by fighting honorable opponents who followed predictable patterns. "These humans fight like demons," Thaklon reported to his superiors. "They use tricks and deceptions that no civilized species would consider. They attack command ships first to create chaos. They target supply lines instead of fighting honorably. They have corrupted the Coalition races and turned them into something unrecognizable." The Zenthari High Command was not pleased with these reports. They had expected the human intervention to be brief and ineffective. Instead, the war was becoming more difficult and expensive than they had planned. More importantly, their reputation for invincibility was being damaged by repeated defeats at the hands of supposedly inferior forces. Meanwhile, the coalition was gaining confidence with each victory. Species that had been conquered by the Zenthari began sending secret messages asking for help. Refugee ships arrived daily at coalition bases carrying aliens who wanted to join the fight against their former oppressors. Commodore Walsh realized that the conflict was growing beyond a simple, defensive war. "We are not just helping the coalition survive anymore," she told her staff during a planning meeting. "We are leading a rebellion against the entire Zenthari Empire. If we win this war, we will reshape the balance of power in this entire region of the galaxy." The Zenthari response was swift and brutal. They began targeting civilian populations and destroying entire colonies to terrorize their opponents. They used biological weapons on worlds that supported the coalition and enslaved prisoners of war. The Empire was showing its true nature as a predatory civilization that ruled through fear and violence. Human advisors worked harder to prepare coalition forces for larger battles that were surely coming. They taught alien crews how to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems and how to use propaganda to turn Zenthari subject populations against their rulers. Most importantly, they shared human intelligence gathering techniques that allowed the coalition to predict enemy movements and prepare ambushes. The training paid off during the Battle of Crimson Nebula, where coalition forces achieved their first major strategic victory. Using complex coordination between 6 different species, the aliens executed a battle plan that would have been impossible for them just months earlier. The battle began with Siloani crystal ships hiding in the nebula gas clouds where their natural camouflage made them nearly invisible. When Zenthari forces entered the area looking for coalition supply bases, they found themselves surrounded by enemies they could not see until it was too late. Vortani ships used their natural magnetism to disrupt Zenthari electronics, while Nereid vessels attacked from above and below in patterns copied from their underwater hunting techniques. Human destroyers provided long-range fire support and electronic warfare coverage that kept the enemy from coordinating their defense. The result was a crushing defeat for the Zenthari forces. 20 enemy ships were destroyed, while coalition losses were minimal. More importantly, the victory proved that the coalition had become a real military force capable of defeating Zenthari fleets in open battle. But War Prime Thaklon was already preparing his response. He requested reinforcements from the Zenthari High Command and began studying human military history to understand how these new tactics worked. The war was entering a new phase where both sides would use everything they had learned to achieve final victory. Supreme War Commander Kokthul arrived in the combat zone with a reputation that made even veteran Zenthari warriors nervous. Unlike other Zenthari leaders who relied on overwhelming force and traditional tactics, Kokthul was known for his ability to adapt and learn from his enemies. He had crushed 17 different civilizations by studying their weaknesses and turning their own strengths against them. Kokthul spent his first week reviewing battle recordings and intelligence reports about human tactics. He watched footage of coalition forces using stealth technology, hit-and-run attacks, and coordinated strikes that seemed impossible for the peaceful aliens to execute. What he saw convinced him that humanity represented a completely new type of warfare that the Zenthari Empire had never encountered before. "These humans do not fight for honor or glory," he reported to the High Command. "They fight to win using any method that gives them an advantage. They have taught the coalition races to abandon their civilized principles and adopt predatory behavior. We are no longer fighting the same enemy we have been defeating for months." Commander Tony Garcia led the human research team that was developing new weapons and tactics specifically for fighting the Zenthari. Garcia was a brilliant engineer who had designed most of Earth's advanced military technology. His team worked around the clock to create solutions for the increasingly difficult challenges they faced. The biggest breakthrough came when Garcia's team developed adaptive camouflage systems that could make human ships nearly invisible to Zenthari sensors. The technology used Silani crystal matrices combined with human stealth materials to create a coating that bent light and energy around a vessel, making it appear to be empty space. They also created quantum entanglement communication networks that were completely immune to Zenthari jamming. The system allowed coalition forces to coordinate attacks across vast distances without any possibility of enemy interference. For the first time, the coalition had better communications technology than their opponents. but Cocthul was working on countermeasures of his own. He began implementing flexible command structures that could function even when communication was disrupted. He trained his captains to operate independently and make tactical decisions without waiting for orders from higher command. Most importantly, he began using the Zenthari's greatest advantage against human tactics. Zenthari warriors were individually much stronger and faster than humans or most coalition species. In boarding actions where technology advantages were minimized, Zenthari troops could overwhelm their opponents through pure physical superiority. The first test of these new strategies came when Cocthul launched a massive assault on Haven Colony, the Coalition's most important world. The planet contained the largest shipyards in Coalition space and served as the headquarters for their military operations. If Haven Colony fell, the entire Coalition would collapse within weeks. Cocthul brought 60 ships, including several super dreadnoughts that had never been defeated in battle. But instead of using traditional Zenthari assault tactics, he implemented a complex siege strategy designed to counter human innovations. His forces established multiple blockade lines around the planet and began systematically destroying orbital defenses using unpredictable attack patterns. The defense of Haven Colony became a brutal test of everything humans had taught their alien allies. Coalition forces used every trick and tactic they had learned, but Cocthul seemed to anticipate their moves and have countermeasures ready. For the first time since human involvement began, the Coalition was losing battles, despite their tactical advantages. Admiral Kate Morrison arrived from Earth with the newest class of human warships designed specifically for this conflict. The stealth destroyers incorporated lessons learned from months of fighting Zenthari forces. They featured adaptive armor that could reconfigure itself based on incoming threats and quantum phase weaponry that could penetrate any known shield technology. Morrison was Earth's most experienced fleet commander with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in every major human conflict for the past 20 years and understood warfare better than any other officer in the Space Navy. Cocthul is different from other Zenthari commanders, Morrison told her staff during a strategy briefing. He learns from his mistakes and adapts his tactics based on what we do. We cannot rely on surprising him with the same methods we used against other enemies. The siege of Haven Colony also marked the first time the conflict moved to planetary surfaces. Zenthari forces began landing troops on the planet's moons and orbital stations to establish forward bases for their assault. Colonel Beth Adams led human Marines in teaching Coalition ground forces how to fight urban warfare, jungle combat, and defensive tactics that their peaceful cultures had never needed to develop. Adams was a tough veteran with brown hair and scars from multiple combat deployments. She had learned street fighting in the colony wars and knew how to turn any environment into a weapon against invading forces. The ground combat revealed new problems with Coalition military thinking. Most alien species were not naturally aggressive even when defending their own homes. They hesitated to kill enemy soldiers and tried to use non-lethal methods even when their lives were at stake. "You have to understand that this is war," Adams told a group of Cathera soldiers during a training session. "The Zenthari will not show mercy to you or your families. If you hesitate to shoot, they will kill you and everyone you are trying to protect." The breakthrough in ground tactics came when Adams taught Coalition forces to use their natural abilities as weapons. Silani crystal beings could create barriers and fortifications from their own bodies. Vortani could generate electromagnetic pulses that disabled Zenthari equipment. Nereid could fight effectively in flooded tunnels and underwater environments where Zenthari could not follow. The climactic battle for Haven Colony's orbital platforms tested every innovation both sides had developed. Cocthul coordinated a massive assault using boarding pod stealth ships and long-range bombardment, while Coalition forces responded with adaptive tactics that changed constantly to avoid predictable patterns. Captain Paul Evans commanded the destroyer Vanguard during the most critical phase of the battle. Evans was a young officer who had proven himself during earlier engagements by thinking quickly under pressure and finding creative solutions to impossible problems. When Zenthari boarding pods breached the main orbital station, Evans realized that conventional defensive tactics would not work. Instead, he coordinated a complex multi-species assault that used each alien race's natural advantages in combination with human tactical thinking. Hyvani soldiers used their natural coordination to execute perfect synchronized attacks, while Silani warriors created crystal barriers that channeled enemy forces into killing zones. Human Marines provided heavy weapons support and electronic warfare that disrupted Xanthari communications. Nereid fighters used their speed and agility to strike at enemy rear positions. The battle lasted 18 hours and resulted in the complete destruction of Cthulhu's assault force. For the first time, a Xanthari siege had been broken through defensive action rather than relief from outside forces. The victory proved that coalition forces had truly mastered human military thinking and could defeat any enemy when properly coordinated. But Cthulhu escaped the defeat with valuable intelligence about human and coalition capabilities. He reported back to the High Command that the enemy had become more dangerous than originally estimated and recommended a complete change in Xanthari strategy. "We cannot defeat these humans using traditional methods," he admitted in his report. "They have turned the coalition into a real military force that matches our own capabilities. The Empire must mobilize its full strength if we want to win this war." The defeat at Haven Colony convinced the Xanthari High Command that the human threat was existential. They began preparing for total war using every resource the Empire possessed. The conflict was about to escalate beyond anything anyone had imagined when it began with a simple plea for help from desperate aliens. Meanwhile, human forces continued developing new technologies and tactics. Commander Garcia's team created weapons that could disrupt Xanthari nervous systems and armor that could repair itself during battle. Admiral Morrison began planning strategic campaigns that would carry the war into Xanthari territory for the first time. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans truly committed themselves to winning a war at any cost. War Emperor Cthulhu himself took command of the Grand Armada after receiving Cthulhu's disturbing reports about human military capabilities. The massive fleet contained over 1,000 ships representing the accumulated military power of the entire Xanthari Empire. Dreadnoughts larger than space stations moved alongside countless smaller vessels in a display of force that had never been assembled in galactic history. Cthulhu was ancient even by Xanthari standards, with scars from hundreds of battles covering his armored hide. He had personally led the conquest of 40 star systems and had never experienced defeat in over 3 centuries of warfare. The idea that primitive humans and their weak coalition allies could threaten his empire filled him. With cold rage, Earth Command recognized that this final confrontation would determine humanity's survival in the galaxy. President Alex Carter authorized complete military mobilization, including experimental weapons programs that had been considered too dangerous for normal use. Admiral Morrison found herself commanding the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled, with ships arriving daily from every human colony and military base. The coalition response was equally massive as news of human tactical innovations spread throughout the galaxy. Dozens of oppressed species that had suffered under Xanthari rule sent ships and volunteers to join the final battle. The Xanthari Empire's policy of brutal conquest had created many enemies who saw this as their chance for freedom. General Linda Hayes arrived from Earth to coordinate the overall strategic campaign. She was Jake Sullivan's older sister and considered the finest military mind of her generation, with advanced degrees in tactical theory and strategic planning. Her arrival marked Earth's complete commitment to winning the war through superior thinking rather than superior force. Linda Hayes spent weeks analyzing intelligence reports and developing a campaign plan that would stretch Xanthari forces across multiple star systems simultaneously. The strategy was based on human military history, particularly the campaigns that had defeated larger armies through coordination and speed rather than direct confrontation. "We cannot match their numbers or their individual ship capabilities," she explained to the combined human and coalition command staff. "But we can force them to fight the kind of war they are not prepared for. The Xanthari expect a final decisive battle where they can use their overwhelming firepower. Instead, we will give them 12 battles happening at the same time across different systems." Dr. Mark Johnson led the crash program to integrate technologies from all allied species into a unified weapons system. Human ships received Kythera, energy shields, and Silani crystal armor, while coalition vessels got human stealth systems and quantum communication networks. The result was a combined fleet that was more than the sum of its individual parts. The grand campaign began with simultaneous strikes across 12 star systems in a coordinated assault that demonstrated everything the coalition had learned about human warfare. Each attack was carefully planned to achieve maximum disruption of Zenthari operations while minimizing casualties among Allied forces. The Vortani used their natural magnetism to disable Zenthari communication networks across an entire sector. Nereid forces conducted underwater assaults on Zenthari bases built on ocean worlds. Silani crystal ships created false sensor readings that made small forces appear to be massive fleets, causing Zenthari commanders to waste resources responding to phantom threats. Human-trained coalition officers executed complex battle plans that would have been impossible before their exposure to Earth military thinking. They used deception, psychological warfare, and adaptive tactics that kept Zenthari forces constantly off balance and unable to coordinate effective responses. The most successful operation was led by Captain Hayes, who had been promoted after his early victories against Zenthari forces. His task force used advanced stealth technology to penetrate deep into Zenthari territory and strike at their primary supply depot. The destruction of the facility crippled Zenthari logistics for the entire sector and forced them to abandon several conquered worlds. But the Zenthari Empire was not defeated yet. War Emperor Zakthul realized that conventional tactics would not work against human innovation and began implementing increasingly desperate measures. Zenthari forces started destroying civilian targets and using their own people as human shields in an attempt to force coalition forces to fight honorably rather than effectively. The barbaric tactics backfired by turning neutral species against the Zenthari Empire. Worlds that had remained uninvolved in the conflict began providing intelligence and supplies to coalition forces. The galactic media broadcast footage of Zenthari war crimes that destroyed their reputation as honorable conquerors. Admiral Morrison coordinated the final assault on Zarthul Prime, the Zenthari homeworld and capital of their empire. The massive battle involved over 2,000 ships from both sides in the largest space combat engagement in recorded history. Human tactical innovations were tested against the desperate fury of an empire fighting for its survival. The battle began with coalition forces using every deception and misdirection technique they had learned from human advisors. False sensor readings made the attacking fleet appear to be approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. Electronic warfare systems disrupted Zenthari communications, while psychological warfare broadcasts spread confusion and doubt among enemy crews. Captain Rachel Ford led her fighter squadrons in a series of precision strikes against Zenthari command ships, using tactics that emphasized speed and unpredictability over direct confrontation. The small human craft moved in patterns based on chaos theory that made them nearly impossible to target, while allowing them to penetrate deep into enemy formations. The breakthrough came when Colonel Adams led a combined force of human Marines and coalition ground troops in a daring assault on the planetary defense control centers. Using urban warfare techniques and alien natural abilities, they captured the facilities that controlled Zarthul Prime's orbital weapon platforms. With their planetary defenses turned against them, the Zenthari fleet found itself trapped between attacking coalition forces and their own defensive systems. The psychological impact of seeing their homeworld's weapons firing on their own ships shattered Zenthari morale and caused massive defections among their forces. War Emperor Zakthul faced the choice between total annihilation of his people and negotiated surrender. The ancient warrior who had never known defeat realized that human military thinking represented an evolution in warfare that his empire could not match. Rather than see his species destroyed, he chose to surrender and negotiate terms for peace. The surrender ceremony took place aboard Admiral Morrison's flagship with representatives from every species that had participated in the coalition. Zakthul formally acknowledged defeat and agreed to the complete restructuring of the former Zenthari Empire into democratic federations that would be overseen by the expanded coalition. The transformation was swift and comprehensive. Zenthari military commanders were retrained using human educational methods that emphasized cooperation over domination. Former slave worlds were liberated and given representation in the new galactic government. The warrior culture that had sustained the empire for centuries was gradually replaced by values based on mutual respect and peaceful cooperation. Humanity emerged from the war as a major galactic power not through conquest, but through their unique ability to teach and inspire others. The aliens who had originally pleaded for support now served alongside humans as equal partners in maintaining galactic peace and security. The most lasting legacy of the war was the establishment of the Galactic Defense Academy on Earth, where species from throughout the galaxy came to study human military philosophy and tactical innovation. The curriculum emphasized not just how to fight wars, but how to prevent them through diplomacy, intelligence gathering, and mutual cooperation. 10 years after the first desperate plea from Veltar, the galaxy had been completely transformed. The former Zenthari Empire had become a peaceful federation. The coalition had evolved into a true galactic government representing hundreds of different species. Most importantly, the principles of human military thinking had been adapted to create a new form of peacekeeping that emphasized prevention over reaction. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of Meridian Station where the entire conflict had begun with a single transmission from desperate aliens. He was reviewing reports from distant sectors where new conflicts were being resolved through negotiation and strategic thinking rather than massive battles. A communication alert sounded, and Sullivan smiled as he recognized the pattern. It was another plea for help from a distant galaxy where unknown beings faced their own oppressors. The message was desperate and frightened, just like Veltar's original transmission. But Sullivan knew that humanity was ready to answer the call. The greatest strength of the human species was not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to adapt, teach, and unite diverse groups under common cause. The aliens had not just asked for military support, they had received teachers who transformed their entire understanding of conflict and cooperation. As Sullivan prepared to forward the new message to Earth Command, he reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven that true victory came not from defeating enemies, but from turning them into allies. The battlefield belonged to Earth, not because humans were the strongest fighters, but because they were the best teachers, in a universe that desperately needed to learn.